As of next week, we have begun and will begin to stop moving federal funds into those states until they comply.
If you receive SNAP, a single failed EBT swipe can be enough to panic an entire household. The benefit is not generous, but it is predictable, and that predictability keeps meals from breaking apart. In 2025, that predictability was pulled into a vortex of data disputes and the risk of interrupted payments, leaving low-income recipients, seniors, people with disabilities, and families with children living with uncertainty. The story became hot because two developments overlapped. The first was the USDA demand that states provide recipient data and SNAP case records to the federal government, paired with warnings that administrative funding could be withheld if states did not comply. The second was a chain of disruptions during a federal government shutdown, when states warned benefits could be delayed or halted. Lawsuits followed, and court orders pushed USDA to release funds. On the legal and institutional framework, the opening marker was a USDA announcement dated May 6, 2025. Agriculture Secretary Brooke R. Rollins said USDA would require states to ensure that records related to SNAP benefits and allocations are shared with the federal government to strengthen program integrity and ensure lawful use of federal funds. USDA framed this move in the context of an executive order dated March 20, 2025, aimed at eliminating information silos across government. Next, the Federal Register on June 23, 2025, published a notice under the Privacy Act of 1974 establishing USDA FNS 15, the National SNAP Information Database. The notice described purposes including eligibility verification, duplication detection, and program integrity checks, including matching against federal databases. It stated the system may contain sensitive identifiers such as Social Security numbers, dates of birth, addresses, EBT card data, case information, and EBT transaction data. The Federal Register also indicated that routine uses would take effect on July 23, 2025. By July, privacy concerns became central. Reuters on July 17, 2025, reported that Democratic senators sent a letter opposing the National SNAP Recipient Database, arguing it would violate privacy and erode public trust. Reuters described USDA seeking sensitive information, including data tied to immigration status, arguing it would help address fraud and duplication. Reuters also reported a July 9th letter from Secretary Rollins outlining a timeline that began collection on July 24th and required states to submit data by July 30th. At the state level, the Washington State Attorney General's Office announced on July 28, 2025, that it was suing the federal administration over the SNAP data demand. The statement emphasized concerns that personal data could be used beyond SNAP administration and underscored how many residents rely on the program. On September 19, 2025, Reuters reported that the U.S. District Judge Maxine Chesney issued a temporary block on the Trump administration and USDA using funding threats to force data disclosure from 19 states and Washington, D.C. Reuters said the administration sought the database for immigration checks and fraud prevention, while states argued SNAP data sharing is legally limited to purposes directly connected to SNAP administration and enforcement. AP reported around the same period that a court order temporarily blocked collection of personal SNAP data across 21 states and Washington, D.C. While the data dispute continued, shutdown risk delivered a second shock. Reuters on October 25, 2025, reported that states warned benefits could halt if the shutdown dragged on, in a context where about 41 million people receive SNAP and nearly 7 million receive WIC.
On October 24th, Reuters reported a USDA memo stating the agency would not use contingency funds to issue November SNAP benefits because the legal basis had lapsed, and that USDA would not reimburse states if they chose to pay benefits out of state funds during the shutdown. States responded with litigation. Reuters on October 28th reported that states sued to stop an interruption expected to begin November 1. On November 1, Reuters reported that most states could not fill the gap, noting Virginia spends about $143 million per month on SNAP, and that some states could only provide temporary support within budget limits. On November 3rd, Reuters reported USDA would use roughly $5.25 billion in contingency funds to pay partial November benefits under a court order. Reuters reported about $600 million would cover administrative costs and about $4.65 billion would fund benefits, roughly half of normal allotments, while SNAP typically requires $8 to $9 billion per month. Reuters also reported USDA warning that adjusting state systems for recalculation and issuance could take anywhere from a few weeks to several months. The tug of war continued into mid-November. Reuters on November 9th reported USDA told states to undo efforts to issue full benefits after the Supreme Court allowed the administration to temporarily withhold part of the money while lower court proceedings continued. On November 10th, Reuters summarized that benefits for roughly 42 million recipients remain tied to legal battles and the shutdown, and it cited maximum benefit figures referenced in its reporting, including $298 for a one-person household and $546 for a two-person household at the time. On December 2, 2025, the focus returned to data and funding threats. Reuters reported Secretary Rollins said USDA would begin stopping the transfer of certain federal funds to states that refused to provide SNAP data. AP, PBS, and Politico described the same warning that federal funds could be withheld if Democratic-led states did not deliver recipient data, emphasizing that the immediate target was SNAP administrative funding. If administrative funding is cut, the first risk is operational disruption at the state level, from staffing that processes cases to technology systems and frontline assistance for recipients. From a multidisciplinary perspective, the collected sources show SNAP functions both as a safety net and as large-scale essential spending. When payments are interrupted or reduced, effects spread from kitchen tables to local food retailers, food banks, and public health. For labor markets, part-time workers and households with unstable incomes often rely on SNAP to keep nutrition stable when wages fluctuate. For public health, short-term drops in nutrition can heighten risks for already vulnerable groups. The debate has two core lines, both reflected in the sources. Supporters emphasize program integrity, fraud reduction, and the need for comprehensive data to conduct cross-checks. Critics emphasize legal limits on SNAP data sharing, privacy risks under the Privacy Act, and the consequences of turning data demands into a financial lever by withholding administrative funds. The temporary injunction in September and the litigation chain in October and November show how objectives of fraud prevention collide with privacy protections. Looking ahead, based on the published milestones, the Federal Register notice dated June 23, 2025, set routine uses for FNS 15 to take effect July 23, 2025, alongside the collection schedule Reuters attributed to the July 9th letter. After the December 2, 2025 statement about withholding administrative funds, the key to watch is how USDA implements the threat and how states respond, given the already established pattern of lawsuits and court intervention. In closing, SNAP in 2025 sits at the intersection of data, privacy, and fiscal power. The collected mainstream reporting and official notices describe a reality in which procedural conflict can quickly become a daily meal risk for tens of millions. The next developments to monitor are court rulings, the level of enforcement around withholding administrative funding, and whether a workable method of lawful data sharing can be reached without destabilizing benefit delivery.